The dining chamber was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The room was circular, with the walls rising in gentle spirals toward a domed ceiling that displayed a slowly shifting pattern of stars. The floor was made of what looked like polished stone, but it felt warm and slightly yielding under his feet, as if it were somehow alive. In the center of the room was a low, crescent-shaped table that seemed to have grown from the floor itself. The surface was smooth and dark, with veins of the same silver that decorated Velnara's carapace running through it like rivers of light. Around the table were cushioned platforms at different heights, clearly designed to accommodate the Cathani physiology. "Please, sit," Velnara said, gesturing to a platform that had been adjusted to human proportions. "Zephyr has told me much about your dietary requirements. I have ensured that all the food we share tonight will be safe and pleasant for your consumption." Marcus settled onto the platform, which was surprisingly comfortable despite its alien design. The fabric beneath him seemed to adjust to his body temperature, warming where he was cool and cooling where he was warm. As he looked around the room, he noticed other details that spoke of careful preparation. The lighting had been adjusted to a spectrum more comfortable for human eyes, and there was a subtle ventilation system providing air that smelled familiar and clean. "You went to a lot of trouble," Marcus said, genuinely touched by the consideration that had gone into making him comfortable. "A good host adapts to her guests," Velnara replied, settling gracefully onto her own platform. Her forearms moved with fluid precision as she began arranging items on the table. "But adaptation requires understanding. Tell me, Marcus Chen of Earth, what do you understand about Cathani society?" The question felt like the beginning of an examination, and Marcus chose his words carefully. "I know that your society is built around family units called nests, led by matriarchs who make decisions for the family's welfare. I know that you value intelligence, harmony, and careful consideration of consequences. I know that you rarely form close relationships outside your own species." "An adequate summary," Velnara said, though Marcus detected something in her tone that suggested she found his answer incomplete. "But knowledge from cultural guides is not the same as understanding. What have you observed about my son that goes beyond what your guides taught you?" Marcus glanced at Zephyr, who was arranging dishes with nervous precision, his carapace cycling through muted colors. This felt like dangerous territory, but Velnara's intelligent eyes demanded honesty. "I've observed that Zephyr is curious about everything," Marcus said slowly. "Not just intellectually curious, but emotionally curious. He wants to understand not just how things work, but how they feel. He asks me questions about human emotions that your cultural guides probably can't answer, because they're about the experience of being human, not just human behavior." Velnara's carapace shifted to a deep, thoughtful blue. "Continue." "He laughs," Marcus said, growing more confident. "I know the guides say that Cathani don't experience humor the way humans do, but Zephyr laughs at human jokes. Not just polite acknowledgement, but genuine amusement. And he started making jokes of his own, combining Cathani logic patterns with human absurdity in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do." "You have been observant," Velnara said, and Marcus couldn't tell if she was pleased or concerned. "What else?" "He dreams," Marcus said quietly. "He told me that Cathani don't usually remember dreams, but since we've been roommates, he's started having vivid dreams that he remembers clearly. Dreams about flying through Earth's skies, about swimming in our oceans, about experiences that he's never had but somehow imagines perfectly." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the subtle humming of the station's life support systems. Zephyr had gone completely still, his carapace a neutral gray that Marcus had never seen before. Velnara's eyes were fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. "These observations trouble you," Velnara said finally. "It wasn't a question. They surprise me," Marcus admitted, "but they don't trouble me. If anything, they make me value our friendship more. It means that what we have isn't just cultural exchange or political cooperation, it's something real." "And what would you do?" Velnara asked, her voice carrying a weight that made Marcus's heart race. "If I told you that these changes in my son are dangerous, that this emotional curiosity and dream sharing and laughter are symptoms of a condition that could threaten his standing in Cathani society?" Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "Is that what you're telling me?" "I am asking what you would do," Velnara repeated, her carapace shifting to colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Marcus looked at Zephyr, who was still motionless and felt a surge of protective anger. I would ask why emotional growth and the capacity for genuine friendship are considered dangerous. I would ask what kind of society punishes its members for becoming more than they were, and then I would do whatever I could to protect my friend. Even if it meant defying the authority of a matriarch. Felnara's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath it. Even then, Marcus said, meeting her gaze directly despite the cultural protocol against it, friendship means standing by someone when it matters, not just when it's convenient. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Marcus could see that Felnara's carapace was cycling through a complex pattern of colors, shifting and flowing in ways that seemed almost like a conversation. Finally, she let out a sound that took Marcus a moment to recognize as laughter. "You care for him," she said, and her carapace brightened to warm gold. "Truly care, not as a diplomatic gesture or cultural curiosity, but as family cares for family." "Of course I do," Marcus said, confusion mixing with relief. "He's my friend." "Yes," Felnara said, reaching across the table to touch Zephyr's arm with one of her hands. "He is. And that, Marcus Cheneverth, is precisely what I hope to discover." Zephyr's carapace suddenly exploded into brilliant colors, cycling through what Marcus recognized as joy, relief, and gratitude all at once. "Mother, I do not understand." "What is happening?" Felnara's laughter filled the chamber, a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony. "What is happening, my child, is that I have confirmed something remarkable. And now we must discuss why this human's friendship may be the key to saving not just you, but our entire species." The next 3 days passed in a blur of intensive cultural training that left Marcus feeling like his brain might explode. Zephyr had taken his role as cultural instructor very seriously, transforming their shared quarters into an impromptu classroom, complete with holographic displays showing proper Cathani dining positions, gift-giving protocols, and conversation etiquette. "Remember," Zephyr said for what felt like the 100th time, his forearms demonstrating the proper way to acknowledge a matriarch's presence. "You must keep your hands visible at all times. Hidden hands suggest deception or aggression in our culture. Also, direct eye contact should be brief and respectful. Prolonged staring is considered a challenge." Marcus practiced the greeting gesture again, bowing slightly while keeping his arms extended to his sides, palms open and facing forward. It felt awkward and unnatural, but Zephyr's carapace had shifted to an encouraging green, so he figured he was getting it right. "What about gifts?" Marcus asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Should I bring something?" "This is where things become complicated," Zephyr admitted, his coloring shifting to that nervous amber again. "Traditionally, guests bring offerings to the matriarch, but the offerings must be meaningful, not merely expensive. They should represent something important about the giver's culture or personal values." Marcus had spent hours agonizing over this. What could he possibly bring that would be meaningful to an alien matriarch? He had considered various Earth items, but everything seemed either too mundane or potentially offensive. Finally, he had settled on something that felt right, though he wasn't entirely sure why. The day of the dinner arrived with Marcus feeling like he hadn't slept in weeks. He stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the formal clothing that Zephyr had helped him select. The outfit was a compromise between human formal wear and Cathani expectations. Simple but elegant clothing in neutral colors that wouldn't accidentally convey any unintended messages. "You look acceptable," Zephyr said, though his carapace was cycling through nervous colors. "Remember, the shuttle will take us to my family's section of the station. The nest is located in the high-gravity area, which may feel uncomfortable for you." "How uncomfortable are we talking?" Marcus asked, checking his appearance one final time. "Perhaps 20% heavier than standard station gravity. Cathani prefer more weight for proper balance and movement. You will adjust quickly." The shuttle ride to the Cathani section was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. As they traveled through the station's transport tubes, the architecture gradually changed from the utilitarian human areas to something that looked like it had grown rather than been built. The Cathani favored organic curves and flowing lines, with surfaces that seemed to pulse gently with bioluminescent patterns. When they arrived at the nest, Marcus had to stop and stare. The entrance was a work of art, with intricate crystalline formations that caught and refracted light in dazzling patterns. The doorway itself was tall enough to accommodate the Cathani's impressive height, and as they approached, it seemed to recognize Zephyr and began to glow with welcoming colors. "The nest responds to family members," Zephyr explained, noticing Marcus's amazement. It knows I belong here, and by extension it knows you are welcome because you are with me. The interior of the nest was even more breathtaking. The walls curved upward in spiral patterns, creating multiple levels connected by ramps that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Everything was lit by the same gentle bioluminescence that Marcus had seen outside, creating an atmosphere that was both alien and somehow deeply peaceful. "Zephyr, my child," a voice called from above them, musical and rich with harmonics that Marcus could feel as much as hear. "You have brought our guest." Marcus looked up to see a figure descending one of the curved ramps, and his breath caught in his throat. Matriarch Velnara was clearly Zephyr's mother, sharing his elegant build and graceful movement, but she was somehow more. Her carapace was a deep, lustrous black shot through with veins of silver that seemed to move like liquid metal. She was slightly taller than Zephyr, and her forearms moved with the kind of precise control that spoke of decades of authority and responsibility. But what struck Marcus most were her eyes. Like all Cathani, they were large and multifaceted, but where Zephyr's eyes held curiosity and warmth, the matriarch's held an intelligence so sharp and focused that Marcus felt like she was looking straight through him, cataloging everything about him in seconds. "Honored matriarch," Marcus said, performing the greeting that Zephyr had taught him. To his relief, his voice came out steady despite the nervousness churning in his stomach. "Marcus Chen of Earth," she replied, her own greeting gesture so fluid it looked like a dance. "Welcome to my nest. I am Velnara, and I have been very curious to meet the human who has so thoroughly befriended my son." There was something in her tone that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Not hostility, but not simple welcome either. It was as if she was presenting him with a puzzle and waiting to see how he would solve it. "Thank you for inviting me, honored matriarch," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket for the gift he had chosen. "I brought something from my world, something that I hope will honor your hospitality." He pulled out a small leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth by countless hands. Velnara's eyes focused on it with laser intensity, and Marcus saw her carapace shift to colors he didn't recognize. "It's a journal," Marcus explained, feeling suddenly uncertain about his choice. "It belonged to my grandmother. She wrote in it every day for 60 years, recording her thoughts, her dreams, her observations about the world around her. In human culture, we believe that when we share our thoughts honestly, we share part of our soul." Velnara extended one of her 4 hands to accept the gift, her movements careful and deliberate. As her fingers touched the leather cover, Marcus saw her carapace shift to a warm, deep gold. "A record of thoughts spanning decades," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect, a chronicle of a life fully lived and carefully observed. "This is indeed a meaningful gift, Marcus Chen of Earth. I thought," Marcus said, encouraged by her reaction, "that since you're curious about humans, you might find it interesting to read how one human saw her world. My grandmother was very wise, and she had a way of finding beauty and meaning in everyday things." Zephyr's carapace had shifted to a brilliant, happy gold, and Marcus realized that he had somehow passed the first test. But as Velnara cradled the journal in her hands, studying it with those sharp, intelligent eyes, Marcus got the distinct impression that the real tests were still to come. "Come," the matriarch said, turning toward another flowing ramp. "Let us share nourishment and conversation. I have many questions for you, Marcus Chen of Earth, and I suspect you have questions for me as well." As they followed her deeper into the nest, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner was going to be far more complicated than he had imagined. Marcus Chen stared at the invitation hologram floating above his desk, its blue light casting strange shadows across his cramped dormitory room. The symbols shifted and rearranged themselves as the universal translator worked its magic, converting Cathani script into readable English. But no amount of translation could help him understand what this really meant. "Formal dinner invitation," he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "The honor of your presence is requested at the dwelling of Matriarch Velnara Cathani, mother of Zephyr Cathani, for an evening of cultural exchange and nourishment sharing." Marcus had been living on the orbital station Terra Proxima for 8 months now, one of only 12 humans selected for the interspecies exchange program. The station housed representatives from over 40 different alien species, all supposedly working together to build better relationships across the galaxy. Most days, Marcus felt like he was barely keeping his head above water, struggling to understand alien customs that seemed to change depending on which species he was dealing with. His roommate situation had been the one bright spot in this whole experience. Zephyr was a Kethani, a species that looked somewhat like a cross between a tall, elegant mantis and a graceful bird. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with 4 arms that moved with fluid precision and large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to capture every detail of the world around them, Zephyr had initially terrified Marcus. But after a few awkward weeks of cultural misunderstandings and shared meals, they had become genuine friends. The Kethani were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible intelligence and their complex social structures. Their society was built around family units called nests, with each nest being led by a matriarch who held absolute authority over all family decisions. What made this invitation so confusing was that humans weren't typically invited to family gatherings. In fact, Marcus had never heard of any human being invited to a Kethani nest dinner. He glanced over at Zephyr's side of the room, where his friend sat in his meditation alcove, all 4 arms moving in the intricate patterns that Kethani used for deep thought exercises. Zephyr's carapace had taken on a deep blue color, which Marcus had learned meant his friend was concentrating intensely. "Hey, Zeph," Marcus called out, using the nickname that had made Zephyr's eyes flash with amusement when he first heard it. "I got this invitation from your mother. Is this some kind of joke?" Zephyr's 4 arms immediately stopped their movement, and his large eyes turned toward Marcus. The blue in his carapace shifted to a pale green that Marcus recognized as surprise. "She actually sent it," Zephyr said, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Kethani possessed. "I was not certain she would follow through with her intention." "Wait, you knew about this?" Marcus stood up from his desk, the invitation still floating in the air behind him. "What's this about, Zeph? Your people don't invite outsiders to family dinners. I've read the cultural guides." Zephyr's carapace flickered through several colors before settling on a warm amber that Marcus had come to associate with complex emotions. "The cultural guides are not wrong, Marcus, friend. This invitation is unusual, very unusual. Unusual how? Like, unusual in a good way or unusual in a the human is about to become dinner way?" Marcus tried to keep his tone light, but there was real concern in his voice. He had heard stories about species that still practiced ritualistic consumption of other intelligent beings, though the Kethani had never been mentioned as one of them. "Nothing dangerous," Zephyr assured him quickly, his carapace shifting to a soothing lavender. "My mother is curious about you. She has been asking many questions." "Questions about what?" Zephyr's 4 arms began moving in what Marcus recognized as a nervous gesture. "About your friendship with me. About human behavior. About why you chose to room with a Kethani when you could have requested a human roommate." Marcus thought back to his first day on the station, when he had been given the choice of roommates. Most of the other humans had immediately partnered up with their own species, which was understandable. Everything about living with an alien was complicated, from different sleep cycles to completely different dietary needs. But something about Zephyr had intrigued Marcus. Maybe it was the way Zephyr had looked at the humans with genuine curiosity rather than the barely concealed disgust or fear that Marcus had seen in many other species' eyes. "I chose you because you seemed interesting," Marcus said honestly, "and because you were the only one who actually looked at me like I was a person, instead of some kind of exotic animal." Zephyr's carapace brightened to a warm gold. "This is what interests my mother. Kethani do not typically form emotional bonds with other species. We are polite, we are diplomatic, but we do not become friends. Yet here I am, sharing space and meals and thoughts with a human and finding genuine pleasure in your company. So your mother wants to figure out what makes me special?" Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. "What if she decides I'm a bad influence on you? Then she would forbid our friendship and arrange for you to be transferred to different quarters," Zephyr said matter-of-factly. "But I do not believe this is her intention. My mother is one of the most respected matriarchs in our space. She does not make decisions lightly, and she does not invite beings to our nest without purpose." Marcus walked over to his small window and looked out at the swirling colors of the nearby nebula. The space station rotated slowly, giving him a constantly changing view of the cosmos beyond. He had come here to learn, to be part of something bigger than himself, to help build bridges between species that had never understood each other, but he had never expected to find real friendship, and he certainly hadn't expected that friendship to draw the attention of alien royalty. "What should I expect at this dinner?" he asked, turning back to Zephyr. "I don't want to accidentally insult your mother or break some important cultural rule." Zephyr's carapace shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Marcus had never seen before. "I am not certain what to expect, Marcus friend. This is unprecedented, but I will help you prepare. We have 3 days before the dinner. That should be enough time to teach you the basic protocols of nest etiquette." Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror. Whatever Matriarch Velnara wanted, he was about to find out, and somehow he had the feeling that this dinner was going to change everything. Marcus stared at Velnara, trying to process what she had just said. Save their entire species? He looked at Zephyr, whose carapace was now cycling through patterns of confusion and concern that mirrored his own feelings exactly. "I think I need more explanation," Marcus said carefully. "When you say save your species, are we talking about some kind of threat? A disease? A war?" Velnara's forearms moved in intricate patterns as she began serving food from the various dishes arranged on the table. The movements were graceful and precise, but Marcus could see tension in the way she held herself. "The threat is more subtle than disease or war," she said, placing a bowl of something that looked like crystallized fruit in front of Marcus. "It is the threat of stagnation, of becoming so perfect in our isolation that we lose the ability to grow." She settled back onto her platform, her carapace shifting to the deep blue that Marcus had learned indicated serious contemplation. "Tell me, Marcus Chen of Earth, what do you know about Cathani history?" "Only the basics," Marcus admitted, tasting the crystallized fruit and finding it surprisingly sweet and complex. "I know you've been spacefaring for thousands of years, that you have one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and that you've traditionally been very selective about contact with other species." "Selective," Velnara repeated, and there was something bitter in her tone. "A diplomatic way of saying isolationist. For 3,000 years, the Cathani have pursued perfection through careful control. We breed for intelligence, we educate for efficiency, we structure our society to eliminate chaos and unpredictability." Zephyr's carapace had shifted to concerned yellow. "Mother, surely our achievements prove the wisdom of this approach. We have eliminated war, poverty, and disease. Our technology advances steadily. Our people live long, productive lives. And we have not produced a truly original thought in 2 centuries, Velnara said quietly. We solve problems efficiently, but we no longer ask new questions. We maintain our technology, but we no longer make breakthroughs. We are becoming a museum of ourselves, beautiful and static and ultimately lifeless. Marcus set down his eating utensil, beginning to understand. You're talking about creativity, innovation, the kind of thinking that comes from combining different perspectives. Precisely, Velnara said, her carapace brightening with approval. And this is what makes your friendship with my son so remarkable. In 8 months of cohabitation with a human, Zephyr has begun to think in ways that no Cathani has thought for generations. He experiences emotions that we have nearly bred out of our species. He asks questions that would never occur to a traditionally educated Cathani mind. But I heard you say this was dangerous, Marcus said, glancing at Zephyr, who was listening with rapt attention. It is dangerous, Velnara confirmed. The Council of Matriarchs views these changes as contamination. They believe that exposure to human unpredictability is corrupting our young people's minds. There have been discussions about ending the exchange program and severing contact with humanity entirely. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. And you disagree? I believe that contamination is exactly what we need, Velnara said, her voice ringing with conviction. I believe that if we do not find a way to reintroduce chaos and creativity into our society, we will stagnate completely. We will become a species of perfect, efficient robots, capable of maintaining what we have but incapable of growth. What about the other matriarchs? Marcus asked. Surely some of them must see the problem. Velnara's carapace darkened. Some do, but they are outnumbered by those who fear change more than stagnation. The vote to end the exchange program is scheduled for next month. If it passes, all human Cathani contact will be severed, and any Cathani who shows signs of human influence will be subjected to corrective therapy. Marcus's blood ran cold. Corrective therapy? Mental conditioning to eliminate unauthorized emotional responses and thinking patterns, Zephyr said quietly, his carapace a sick, pale color. It would make me forget our friendship. Forget the dreams, the laughter, the questions. Make me into a proper Cathani again. Over my dead body, Marcus said, the words coming out with more force than he had intended. Sorry, that's a human expression, meaning I won't let it happen. This brings us to why I invited you here, Velnara said, leaning forward. I need your help, Marcus Cheneverth. Not just your friendship with my son, but your assistance in proving to the Council that human Cathani cooperation can benefit both our species. What kind of assistance? Marcus asked, though he was already certain he would agree to whatever she asked. There is a problem that the Cathani scientific community has been working on for 50 years without success, Velnara explained. It involves the development of a new type of quantum computing system that could revolutionize space travel. Our best minds have approached it with perfect logic and systematic analysis, and they have made no progress whatsoever. And you think a human perspective might help? Marcus asked. I think a human perspective combined with Cathani knowledge might accomplish what neither could achieve alone, Velnara said. I have been watching the reports from other human-alien partnerships in the exchange program. When humans work with other species, the results are often far superior to what either species could accomplish independently. Marcus thought about this, remembering some of the research projects he had heard about from other participants in the exchange program. The human tendency toward intuitive leaps and creative problem-solving did seem to complement the systematic approaches of many alien species. What would this involve? He asked. I would arrange for you and Zephyr to be assigned to the quantum computing project, Velnara said. You would work with our top scientists, contributing human insights to Cathani methodology. If you could help solve this problem, it would provide powerful evidence that human Cathani cooperation benefits both species. And if we can't solve it? Marcus asked. Velnara's carapace shifted to somber gray. Then the Council will vote to end the exchange program. Zephyr will undergo corrective therapy, and our species will continue its slow march toward perfect, sterile extinction. Marcus looked at Zephyr, whose large eyes were fixed on him with an expression of hope and terror. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical force. The friendship that had started as a simple matter of curiosity and compatibility had somehow become the potential salvation of an entire species. When do we start? Marcus asked. Velnara's carapace exploded into brilliant gold, and for the first time since he had met her, Marcus saw her smile. The Cathani Research Facility was a marvel of organic architecture and advanced technology. Marcus stood in the main laboratory, surrounded by equipment that looked more like living coral formations than traditional machinery. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing complex mathematical equations and three-dimensional models that hurt his brain to look at directly. The quantum resonance matrix, Dr. Kethoran explained, his forearms gesturing at the largest holographic display, requires perfect harmonic alignment between 17 different dimensional frequencies. We have been able to achieve stable alignment for up to 12 frequencies, but the addition of the 13th creates cascade failures throughout the entire system. Marcus studied the swirling patterns of light and data, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Beside him, Zephyr was completely absorbed in the display, his carapace cycling through colors that Marcus had learned indicated intense concentration. It had been 2 weeks since the dinner at Velnara's nest, and every day had brought new challenges. The Cathani scientific team had welcomed Marcus with polite professionalism, but he could sense their skepticism. After all, he was just a human with a basic understanding of quantum physics, working alongside some of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. What happens when you try to force the 13th frequency into alignment? Marcus asked, earning a slight color shift from Dr. Kethoran that he interpreted as surprise at the directness of the question. The system attempts to maintain harmonic balance, another scientist, Dr. Velthara explained, but the computational load becomes exponentially complex. Our processing arrays cannot handle the calculations quickly enough to maintain stability. Marcus nodded, walking around the holographic display to view it from different angles. There was something about the problem that reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite place what it was. Have you tried not forcing it? He asked. The laboratory went quiet. All 4 Cathani scientists turned to look at Marcus, their carapaces shifting to colors he didn't recognize. I apologize, Dr. Kethoran said carefully, but I do not understand your question. How does one achieve harmonic alignment without actively establishing the necessary frequency relationships? Marcus found himself thinking about a conversation he'd had with his grandmother years ago, back when he was struggling with a particularly difficult piece of music. She had been trying to teach him to play an old folk song on her guitar, and he kept getting frustrated because he couldn't make his fingers move fast enough to hit all the notes correctly. "My grandmother once told me something about music," Marcus said slowly, still walking around the display. "She said that sometimes the most beautiful harmonies happen when you stop trying to control every note and let the music find its own balance." Zephyr's carapace brightened to interested gold. "You are suggesting a less controlled approach to frequency alignment?" "I'm suggesting that maybe the problem isn't that you can't align 17 frequencies perfectly," Marcus said, an idea beginning to take shape in his mind. "Maybe the problem is that you're trying to align them all in the same way." Dr. Velthara's forearms moved in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of confusion. "But harmonic alignment requires precise mathematical relationships. There is only one correct frequency ratio for each dimensional interface." "In traditional harmonic theory, yes," Marcus agreed. "But what if this isn't a traditional harmonic system? What if the quantum matrix is more like a jazz ensemble than a classical orchestra?" The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus wondered if he had accidentally said something offensive. But then Zephyr suddenly moved closer to the display, his carapace cycling through rapid patterns of excitement. "Marcus, friend, explain this jazz ensemble concept," Zephyr said, his musical voice carrying a note of anticipation. Marcus grinned, feeling like he was finally on solid ground. "In classical music, every musician plays exactly what's written on the page. Perfect precision, perfect timing, perfect harmony. But in jazz, the musicians listen to each other and respond to what they hear. They improvise, they take turns leading, they create harmonies that exist only in that moment. Chaotic variables," Dr. Cathoran said, his carapace shifting to deep blue. "You are suggesting that we introduce intentional chaos into a system that requires perfect order." "I'm suggesting that maybe perfect order isn't what the system actually needs," Marcus said. "What if the quantum matrix doesn't want to be controlled? What if it wants to be collaborated with?" Dr. Velthara made a sound that might have been skepticism. "Quantum systems do not have desires or preferences. They operate according to fundamental physical laws, but they also operate according to principles of uncertainty and probability," Marcus countered. "What if instead of trying to force 17 frequencies into perfect alignment, you give them permission to find their own balance? Set up the basic harmonic framework and then let the frequencies adjust dynamically to whatever feels most stable." Zephyr was practically vibrating with excitement, his carapace cycling through brilliant colors. A self-organizing harmonic system. The frequencies would form their own stable relationships based on real-time quantum fluctuations, rather than predetermined mathematical models. "It is an intriguing concept," Dr. Cathoran admitted, though his carapace suggested he was still deeply skeptical. "But our simulations show that such an approach would result in chaotic instability." "Your simulations are based on the assumption that chaos equals instability," Marcus said. "But what if controlled chaos actually creates a different kind of stability? What if the system needs to be a little bit unpredictable in order to remain balanced?" Dr. Velthara's forearms began moving in complex patterns as she manipulated the holographic controls. "We could modify the harmonic alignment protocols to include adaptive variables, allow the frequencies to fluctuate within defined parameters, rather than locking them into fixed ratios. But the computational requirements would be even more complex," Dr. Cathoran pointed out. "Our processing arrays are already operating at maximum capacity." Marcus looked at the swirling displays, thinking about jazz musicians and quantum uncertainty and his grandmother's guitar lessons. Then an idea struck him that was so simple he almost laughed. "What if you're thinking about this backwards?" he said. "Instead of trying to make your computers fast enough to control chaos, what if you make the chaos simple enough that it doesn't need to be controlled?" "Explain," Dr. Cathoran said, his carapace shifting to attentive amber. "In jazz, musicians don't try to calculate every possible harmonic combination in advance," Marcus said. "They learn a few basic rules and then trust their instincts to make good choices in the moment. What if you could teach the quantum matrix to do the same thing?" Zephyr's eyes widened with understanding. "Quantum learning algorithms. Instead of calculating optimal frequency relationships, The system could learn to recognize stable patterns and adapt to them automatically. Dr. Velthara let out what sounded like a gasp. A quantum matrix that learns and evolves its own harmonic preferences. It would require far less computational power, because it would be making decisions based on learned experience, rather than complex calculations. For the first time since Marcus had entered the laboratory, Dr. Cathoran's carapace shifted to the brilliant gold that indicated genuine excitement. This could work. This could actually work. As the Cathani scientists began excitedly discussing implementation possibilities, Marcus felt a hand touch his shoulder. He turned to see Zephyr looking at him with those large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to hold all the colors of the universe. "Thank you, Marcus, friend," Zephyr said quietly. "For the first time in 50 years, we have a new idea." Marcus smiled, watching the alien scientists work with an enthusiasm and creativity that reminded him more of human researchers than the methodical Cathani he had read about in the cultural guides. "Thank you for letting me help. Now let's see if we can make it work." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the same laboratory, but everything had changed. The air hummed with a new kind of energy, and the quantum resonance matrix pulsed with rhythmic patterns that seemed almost alive. 17-dimensional frequencies danced together in perfect, chaotic harmony, creating the most beautiful mathematical music Marcus had ever witnessed. Stability maintained for 72 hours, and counting, Dr. Velthara announced, her carapace glowing with triumphant gold. "The quantum learning algorithms are adapting faster than our most optimistic projections. The system is actually becoming more stable over time as it learns to anticipate and compensate for frequency fluctuations." Marcus watched the display with a mixture of pride and amazement. The solution had taken weeks of collaborative work, combining human intuition with Cathani precision in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. But more than that, he had watched the Cathani scientists change during the process. They had started as methodical, controlled researchers. Now they laughed when experiments failed in unexpected ways, built on each other's ideas with infectious enthusiasm, and asked questions that led to entirely new research directions. "The council meeting is in 2 hours," Zephyr said quietly, appearing beside Marcus with his characteristic silent grace. "My mother has requested that we present our findings to the assembled matriarchs." Marcus felt his stomach clench with nervous energy. Everything they had worked for came down to the next few hours. If the council voted to end the exchange program, all of this would be meaningless. "Are you ready?" Zephyr asked, his carapace cycling through concerned colors. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, though he wasn't sure that was saying much. What's the worst that could happen? They could decide that human influence is too dangerous to tolerate and vote to sever all contact between our species, Zephyr said with characteristic Cathani directness. They could order corrective therapy for any Cathani who shows signs of human contamination. They could declare our research project a dangerous deviation from proper scientific methodology. "Okay, maybe I shouldn't have asked that question," Marcus said, attempting humor to cover his nervousness. Dr. Cathoran approached them, his forearms carrying data tablets and holographic projectors. "The presentation materials are prepared," he said, his carapace showing the same nervous energy that Marcus felt. "I have included comprehensive documentation of our methodology, detailed analysis of the results, and projections for future applications of quantum learning algorithms." "What about the other research teams?" Marcus asked. "Have any other human Cathani partnerships achieved similar breakthroughs?" "2 others have reported significant progress on previously unsolved problems," Dr. Velthara said, joining their group. "The atmospheric processing team has developed a new approach to terraforming that could reduce colonization timeframes by centuries. The xenobiology group has made breakthrough discoveries about cross-species genetic compatibility that could revolutionize medical treatment." "So we're not the only success story," Marcus said, feeling slightly relieved. "No," Zephyr said, "but we are the most dramatic example of what human-Cathani collaboration can achieve. Our project had remained completely stagnant for 50 years until you arrived." The laboratory doors opened with a soft chiming sound, and Velnara entered with her characteristic regal bearing. But Marcus could see tension in the way she held her forearms, and her carapace was cycling through subdued colors that suggested serious concern. "The council is assembled," she said, without preamble. "The debate has been intense, 3 matriarchs have spoken in favor of ending the exchange program. 2 have argued for its continuation. The remaining 4 are undecided. What about you? Marcus asked. Do you get to vote? I have already spoken in favor of continued cooperation, Velnara said. But my words alone are not sufficient. The Council requires proof that human influence benefits rather than corrupts our society. Then let's give them proof, Marcus said, gathering up his own presentation materials. The Council chamber was designed to intimidate. 9 matriarchs sat on elevated platforms arranged in a perfect circle, their carapaces displaying colors that Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. Each was surrounded by holographic displays showing their credentials, achievements, and areas of expertise. The combined intelligence and authority in the room was overwhelming. Marcus found himself standing in the center of the circle with Zephyr beside him, feeling like a specimen about to be dissected. Velnara took her place among the other matriarchs, but she couldn't help him now. Everything depended on their ability to prove that human Cathani cooperation was not just beneficial, but essential. Marcus Chen of Earth, one of the matriarchs said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. You stand before the Council of Matriarchs to defend the practice of human Cathani collaboration. Are you prepared to present your evidence? I am, honored matriarch, Marcus said, activating the holographic projectors. The quantum resonance matrix appeared in the center of the chamber, its 17 frequencies dancing in perfect harmony. For 50 years, Marcus began. The greatest minds of your species worked on this problem using traditional Cathani methodology. Perfect logic, systematic analysis, careful control of all variables. And for 50 years, they made no progress. He gestured to the display where the learning algorithms were adapting in real time to quantum fluctuations. The solution required something that traditional Cathani thinking couldn't provide. It required the willingness to embrace controlled chaos, to trust in emergent patterns, to let the system find its own balance rather than imposing perfect order. One of the matriarchs, her carapace a deep skeptical purple, leaned forward. And you claim that this chaotic approach is superior to logical methodology? I claim that this approach achieved results that logical methodology could not, Marcus replied. But more than that, I claim that the combination of human intuition and Cathani precision created something that neither species could achieve alone. He activated another display, showing the research process itself. Look at how your scientists changed during this project. Dr. Kethoran began asking questions that led to entirely new research directions. Dr. Velthora started building on ideas before they were fully developed, trusting in creative inspiration. They learned to laugh at unexpected failures and use them as stepping stones to success. You describe corruption of proper scientific methodology, another matriarch said, her voice cold. I describe evolution, Marcus countered. I describe your people becoming more than they were. Not less Cathani, but more complete Cathani, beings capable of both logical precision and creative inspiration. Zephyr stepped forward, his carapace blazing with confident gold. Honored matriarchs, I stand before you as proof of what this human speaks. I have not lost my Cathani nature through friendship with Marcus' friend. I have discovered aspects of my nature that I never knew existed. I dream now and laugh and ask questions that would never have occurred to me before. I am still Cathani, but I am also more than I was. The chamber fell silent. Marcus could see the matriarch's carapaces shifting through complex patterns of colors as they processed what they had heard and seen. Finally, the eldest matriarch spoke, her voice carrying the authority of countless years of leadership. You ask us to embrace change, to accept that our traditional ways are insufficient. This is not a small thing you request. I ask you to embrace growth, Marcus said, to choose evolution over stagnation, progress over perfection. Your species has achieved incredible things through control and precision. Imagine what you could achieve with the addition of creativity and adaptability. The voting began without ceremony, each matriarch stating their decision in order of seniority. Marcus felt his heart racing as the voices echoed through the chamber. To continue the exchange program, to end human contact, to continue with expanded cooperation, to end the program immediately, to continue with careful oversight, to continue with enthusiasm. The count was tied 4-4, with only the eldest matriarch remaining. The chamber was absolutely silent as she contemplated her decision, her carapace cycling through colors that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of possibility. "I vote," she said finally, "to expand the human Cathani exchange program and establish permanent collaborative research facilities." Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief, but the eldest matriarch wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "this expansion comes with a condition. Marcus Chen of Earth, you will be appointed as the first human cultural integration specialist, responsible for developing protocols that preserve Cathani identity while encouraging beneficial adaptation. Are you willing to accept this responsibility?" Marcus looked at Zephyr, whose carapace was exploding with joy and relief. Then he looked at Velnara, who was glowing with proud satisfaction. Finally, he looked around the chamber at 9 of the most powerful beings in Cathani society, all waiting for his answer. "I accept," he said, with honor and gratitude. As the council dissolved into excited discussion about implementation details, Marcus realized that his simple desire to make an alien friend had somehow grown into something far more significant. He had become a bridge between species, a guardian of... 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Human Cathani Collaborative Research Station, watching shuttles arrive from both Earth and the Cathani homeworld. The station orbited a beautiful blue-green planet that had been designated as neutral territory, a place where both species could work together without the political complexities of operating in either human or Cathani space. "The atmospheric processors are working better than anyone projected," Zephyr said, appearing beside Marcus with a data tablet in 2 of his 4 hands. "The terraforming team estimates that this world will be ready for colonization in 18 months, rather than the projected 5 years. Marcus smiled, watching a group of human and Cathani engineers work together on the planet's surface far below. From this distance, they looked like a single team, rather than 2 separate species trying to cooperate. "Any word from the xenobiology group?" Marcus asked. "Dr. Sarah Chen has successfully synthesized a treatment for Cathani neural degeneration using modified human stem cell therapy," Zephyr reported, his carapace glowing with satisfaction. "Dr. Velthara calls it the most significant medical breakthrough in Cathani history." "Dr. Sarah Chen," Marcus repeated with a grin. "Still sounds weird hearing my cousin's name in reports from alien medical facilities." The exchange program had expanded far beyond what anyone had originally envisioned. What had started as a small cultural exchange between 12 humans and their alien roommates had grown into a full-scale collaborative effort involving hundreds of researchers, artists, philosophers, and engineers from both species. The breakthroughs were coming so rapidly that Marcus could barely keep track of them all. "Marcus, friend," Zephyr said, his voice taking on the careful tone he used when he had something important to discuss. "I have received communication from my mother. She wishes to extend another dinner invitation." "Another interrogation disguised as a social meal?" Marcus asked with mock suspicion. "Perhaps," Zephyr admitted, his carapace shifting to amused gold. "But this time she wishes you to bring guests. Specifically, she has invited your parents and siblings to visit the station and share a meal with our nest." Marcus felt his eyebrows rise in surprise. "She wants to meet my family. She believes that understanding human family dynamics is essential for developing better cooperation protocols," Zephyr explained. "Also, she is curious about the beings who raised such an effective cultural integration specialist." Marcus had been sending regular reports home to Earth, but the idea of his family actually visiting the station and meeting Cathani matriarchs was both exciting and terrifying. His parents were open-minded people, but they were also very human, with all the chaotic unpredictability that entailed. "Do you think that's a good idea?" Marcus asked. "My little sister Emma is... well, she's 17 and not exactly known for her diplomatic restraint. I believe," Zephyr said carefully, "that your sister's lack of diplomatic restraint is precisely what interests my mother. She has become fascinated by human adolescent psychology and its role in creative development." Marcus laughed, imagining his 17-year-old sister loose in a Cathani nest. Emma was brilliant, artistic, and completely unintimidated by authority figures. She would probably either charm Velnara completely or horrify her beyond measure. "I'll send them the invitation," Marcus said. "But I'm warning you now, my family is not going to be as polite and culturally sensitive as I am." "I am counting on it," Zephyr said, his carapace brightening with anticipation. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself once again in Velnara's dining chamber, but this time the circular table had been expanded to accommodate 6 humans and 4 Keithani. His parents sat on either side of him, looking slightly overwhelmed but trying to hide it. His older brother David was deep in technical discussion with Dr. Cathoran about quantum computing applications. His sister Emma was staring at everything with wide eyes and barely contained excitement. "So," Emma said to Velnara during a pause in the conversation, "Marcus says you're basically alien royalty. What's that like? Do you have to deal with a lot of political drama?" Marcus nearly choked on his food, but Velnara's carapace shifted to delighted gold. "Human directness," she said to Zephyr, "is even more fascinating than I anticipated." "Emma," Marcus's mother said with gentle reproach, "perhaps we should be more diplomatic." "Why?" Emma asked, turning to look at her mother. "I mean, we're all here because Marcus and Zephyr became friends by being honest with each other, right? Seems like honesty is working pretty well." Velnara made the crystal bell sound that Marcus had learned was Keithani laughter. "Your offspring speaks wisdom, Patricia Chen of Earth. Diplomatic courtesy has its place, but genuine understanding requires genuine communication. That's what I keep telling people," Emma said, warming to her subject. "Like when I first heard about Marcus making friends with aliens, I was like, obviously that would work. Marcus has always been good at seeing people for who they really are instead of just what they're supposed to be." Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Zephyr's carapace was cycling through pleased colors. "You have observed this quality in your brother from childhood?" Velnara asked, her attention now completely focused on Emma. "Oh yeah," Emma said enthusiastically. "In high school, he was the only one who bothered to get to know the weird kids. You know, the ones who were too smart or too different or too whatever for the popular crowd. He'd just start talking to them like they were normal people, and half the time they'd end up being the most interesting kids in school." "This is a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident," Velnara observed. "Totally," Emma agreed. "Marcus collects misfits, present company included, I assume." "Emma," Marcus said, mortified. But Velnara was making the laughing sound again. "I believe," Velnara said, "that your sister has identified the fundamental quality that makes human Keithani cooperation successful. Humans excel at seeing potential rather than just current reality." Marcus's father, who had been quietly observing the interaction, leaned forward. "Is that why this partnership works? Because we see each other as what we could become rather than just what we are?" "Precisely," Velnara said, her carapace brightening with respect. "Keithani society has traditionally focused on perfecting what we already are. Human society seems to focus on becoming something more than you currently are. When these approaches combine, the results exceed what either could achieve alone." "So what happens now?" David asked, looking up from his technical discussion. "I mean, this whole program has been incredibly successful. Where does it go from here?" Velnara exchanged a look with Zephyr that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. "That," she said, "depends on whether Marcus Chen of Earth is willing to accept an even greater responsibility." Marcus felt that familiar flutter of nervousness in his stomach. "What kind of responsibility?" "The Council of Matriarchs has voted to establish the first permanent human Keithani colony world," Velnara announced. "A place where members of both species can live and work together permanently, raising families and building a truly integrated society." The dining chamber went completely silent. "And they want Marcus to help establish it?" his mother asked. "They want Marcus to lead it," Velnara corrected. "As the first governor of New Harmony, the world you see below this station." Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "You want me to govern an entire planet?" "We want you to do what you have always done," Zephyr said gently. "See potential where others see problems. Build bridges where others see barriers. Help two species become something greater than either could be alone." Emma let out a whoop of excitement that made several Keithani carapaces shift to startled colors. "My brother is going to be a planetary governor. This is so cool." Marcus looked around the table at his family, all of them beaming with pride and excitement. Then he looked at Zephyr, whose large eyes held all the friendship and trust that had started this incredible journey. Finally, he looked at Velnara, whose carapace was cycling through colors that somehow conveyed both hope and confidence. "When do I start?" he asked. As the dinner dissolved into excited planning and discussion, Marcus realized that what had begun as a simple alien dinner invitation had transformed into something beyond his wildest imagination. He had come to the station hoping to learn about other species. Instead, he had learned about the infinite potential that existed when different kinds of intelligence chose to work together, rather than apart. And as he watched his sister enthusiastically discussing architectural plans with Dr. Velthera while his parents peppered Velnara with questions about Kethani child-rearing practices, Marcus understood that this was just the beginning. The real adventure lay ahead, in the challenge of building a world where human chaos and Kethani order could dance together in imperfect harmony. Outside the windows of the nest, the lights of New Harmony twinkled in the darkness of space, waiting for its first governor to come home.